Planning Commission 2022 meeting. We have not had an in-person meeting for 2 years. 2 years in a row we didn't have one. And we all know why that is. So it's good to get together. We have people that are participating by Zoom. We've got a great crowd here. We're in a beautiful historic building. Great meal we just had, and I think we'll give a quick acknowledgement to the staff. I enjoyed the food so much. I wish I had a little more time to eat it. But, anyway, so I also want to point out, I'm sure this is going to be a lot of tears shed here, that the business portion of the annual meeting has been removed. We did it at last week's regular meeting so that we could keep things kind of light, kind of fun, and not bog things down. And I already told Jen that my vote is to just institute that and handle it the same way going forward. But if anybody objects, you can let us know. In the meantime, you can follow the meeting online or look at our meeting minutes from that exciting meeting. So we'll continue with the fun stuff. So public art and placemaking. I didn't say Dave Landry. This will give you an indication of my importance. I thought I just almost forgot my name. Anyway, thanks for coming. Shayna's going to kick this off and introduce our client panelists, and then we'll get things going. And, enjoy it. It's fun. Thank you.
Okay, if our panelists want to come up and get seated, get started. Like Dave said, we're talking about public art and placemaking today. So I'm going to give a little intro to our panelists before we kick things off. The clicker is up there. We're changing the slides. I might try to readjust this mic so they can use it. So just give me a second. Okay, so today we have with us our 3 panelists. We have Donna Benton from the city of Dover. We have Chris Archer with the New Hampshire Institute of Art with New England College. And we have Matt Wyatt, who's very involved with the city of Rochester with the communications department and also the Rochester Museum of Fine Arts, among other things. So Donna, AICP, is the Director of Planning and Community Development and the President of the New Hampshire Planners Association. She's worked for Dover in multiple roles since 2015. Some of the past projects she is most proud of include revamping and expanding the community trail, being a board member of Coast, representing Dover's Amtrak station on the Northern New England Passenger Rail Authority, and overseeing the creation of Dover's Customer Service Center, among other projects. She has her Master's of Public Administration and a Bachelor of Science in Tourism Planning and Development. And she resides in the Granite State with her 2 young children and husband and loves exploring New England. Chris is an art maker, educator, administrator, and advocate. His studio practice consists of functional and sculptural objects, site-specific installations, and collaborative events. He has exhibited nationally and internationally, earning multiple awards, and has been published in many different publications. Teaching has been an important part of his creative and artistic identity, and he has taught in higher education since 1998, serving as faculty at the New Hampshire Institute of Art and New England College in undergraduate, graduate, and community education programs. And Matt is a multimedia artist living and working in Rochester. His work includes abstract expressionism, collage, and photography. He studied at the New Hampshire Institute of Art and earned a certificate in digital photography from Cornell. His work has received regional and national attention. In 2011, he co-founded the Rochester Museum of Fine Arts and has helped carry more than 100 art exhibitions. He currently works as a public information and community engagement manager for the city of Rochester. So I'm going to turn it now over to our three panelists. We'll start with Matt, a kind of additional introduction and the perspective you bring to the topic of public art and creative placemaking.
Never used the microphone. I was shy. Well, first, thank you for having me today. And if you're photographing me, you should be on my best side over here. And I would prefer it if you could Photoshop me to look like an oil painting. Thank you in advance for that. Yes, so thank you so much for having us and all the work that you do in the region. I do work for the city of Rochester, but I am here on behalf of our art museum that's in our community center. If you haven't been to the James W. Foley Memorial Community Center, take a ride over. You can actually leave right now. You are dismissed and you can go and check it out. It's totally free and we're open Monday through Friday. And we feature a permanent collection of about 200 pieces on display currently. And we have a small gallery that rotates every month. Actually, this is the first time that anybody has seen one of our latest pieces that's over there on the easel. It's actually an animation cell from The Simpsons from one of the earlier seasons. It's actually this one in particular is a Homer Simpson. So this is the kind of art that we show. It's just one piece, but we have a wide breadth of art over there. So check it out sometime.
Thank you. So I'm Donna Benton. Again, I'm the Director of Planning and Community Development in Dover, and we have several partnerships that I'll go over today with the Arts Commission, and we're lucky enough to have two members here, Jane and Cliff, and they can certainly correct me for anything I say wrong. They are more involved than I am. So we have a partnership specifically that I'll be talking about with the Dover Community Trails Committee as well as the Arts Commission, working on several projects, as well as our Dover 400 coming up next year and our waterfront development project that we're looking to add some art into.
Any chance we can not use this? Can you hear me okay? Thanks. Sorry. I'm very excited to be here. Thank you so much for having us here and also bringing attention to the subject of creative placemaking, as nebulous a word as hopefully you know it to be. As a teacher, as a maker, I love ambiguity. I love complex spaces where things are not very clear cut. And so that's number one, the perspective from which I come, or with which I come. I am also, as a maker and as an educator, very interested in expanding and broadening the potential of what art can mean, both to individuals, whether they are makers, whether they are viewers, and also how art is situated in our culture, right? Our culture is so specific. It is so, your condition is based on so many factors. And so to define art, to define what art does or what it is, to me is sort of like missing the point. And one of the things that I bring, I'm hoping to bring, is a little bit of insight from the contemporary art world, where we don't ask about what a piece of art is, but we ask what does it do and how does it operate beyond the maker. Sorry.
That's great, thank you. That's a great transition to our first round, looking at why is public art and placemaking important and why should a community invest? So Chris, kind of elaborating on what you were just saying, can you talk about the importance of public art, not only in its visual appeal, but what it can mean in a community?
I can try. So I think, first of all, when we I think bringing art into the public space, first and foremost, immediately does offer the opportunity to broaden what it can mean and to individualize it. And what I mean by that is, I'm an artist, you're an artist. People often think that we make a physical representation of our self-expression, except we're members of society. We interact with people all the time. You're in there. All of you today will be in my art in some way, shape, or form, right? And I think that bringing art to the public space goes beyond acknowledging that art is important, acknowledging its beauty or its potential beauty, but it also, as art is really a process-oriented entity, right? It's not just about the painting, right? Public art, from my perspective anyway, offers the ability to say that there aren't just two artists up here. We're all creative in all kinds of ways, even in the way that we approach things, even in the way that we engage things. And so to answer your question, I think that public art is a space where we sort of release ourselves from we dissolve boundaries of what is art, who is an artist. And in that way, there's, not to be too hokey, but there is a creative spirit that is potential and on a plane on which we can connect.
And I think to that point, it could mean something different in each community. So can you talk to a little bit about how there's not a one size fits all approach and how this might differ in a rural town versus a city?
Absolutely. Well, specifically, when we hear the term creative placemaking, I know over the last few years, at least in my experience, I've also noticed a trend for there to be sort of a DIY, accessible, very efficient toolkit. How do we do that type of work in our community, right? What are the ways where we can integrate arts and culture strategies into our infrastructure, right? However, for me, that sometimes suggests that it's a very outcome-driven or an outcome-focused idea, right? The idea of like, where's the model? What model can I use to use in this community so that I can get a good outcome? The challenge I have with that, I come from an art perspective, is Rochester is unique, right? Wherever you're from is unique, right? So the variables at play don't necessarily always line up with the model that you might be using. And so if we think of the word toolkit, an array of resources, tools, things with which you can play around with and work towards your goal. Love that idea. If we look at toolkit as sort of a set of directions, right? As an artist, it kind of goes against my grain. This is where I see a real analogy to art, at least from my perspective. If we think of art as a process-driven entity or field, we think of the creative spirit as exploration and not simply execution, it seems really fitting to me, that arts and culture strategies find their way into community building and community development and economic development and all the other infrastructures that we rely on as society.
Thank you. That's a great transition into a question for Donna. Looking at what Dover's done to integrate public art, we'd love to hear a little bit about what's happening in Dover and what has influenced city staff, volunteers, and officials to place importance on public art and placemaking. Do you want something?
Sure. Thank you. So yeah, Chris touched upon some great points that we are utilizing in Dover, and that is taking a multifaceted approach and not just having one direction to get art in our downtown. And a lot of my focus would be on physical art, but I want to make sure that we understand that arts and culture is much more than just paintings, sculptures. It's spoken word, it's plays, it's a general feeling of people being in your community that is coming through the placemaking process. So Dover recognizes that and certainly put some emphasis on that, and we're trying to get it from different directions. So we start with our site plan regulations and certain districts, including our central business district. If you are a developer and you come to meet me and say, I want to redevelop this building in our downtown, my first meeting with you will bring up the art. You need to provide a public art piece at the end of the project. Your first curiosity is how you started talking to the Arts Commission. Do you know what kind of art you're thinking about or where you're going to put it? And then when it actually comes to planning board, where are you going to put it? When is it going to be installed? And every step of the way, we're bringing up art and making sure that they're communicating this and understanding this throughout the process. We are working on certain projects and everything else on the city side too, so that we're doing as we say to others as well. But you have a few visuals for you, things going on in Dover.
Test it, but.
There you go, nice. So in 2018, we adopted a public art in the CBD and Gateway districts, which is mostly our downtown and our gateways into downtown, which is what I was just talking about. And then in 2020, we added art and culture to our recreation master plan when we did that and brought in the Arts Commission and had it be kind of a joint effort. And then certainly we have lots of partnerships with the Arts Commission that I'll be going into, as well as our upcoming Dover 400, which is happening next year in 2023. And then certain examples are an Art Beat, which is a newer program that the Arts Commission has put on of having installations in downtown businesses and throughout the community to bring them in and bring that partnership with different stakeholders in the city. And then certainly we are also working on a survey right now with the Americans for the Arts, which is looking at getting 800 responses by going to different events throughout the city and trying to figure out how much people are spending and looking at the actual economic impacts of that for hard numbers of the benefits in terms of economic development. And then another project, if you've driven through Dover in the last couple of years, you might have noticed is our, there we go, is our Dover wayfinding. So this is a project to try to have some placemaking. We focused on the gateways into the city, but also at the pedestrian level. And certainly we understand that this was kind of the first stepping stone, and that we need to continually look at this and add to it as we go on and see what has maybe been missed. And then again, the Dover Arts Commission is a great committee and very involved. And we are certainly partnering with them again, and they now have a staff liaison that's in the planning department, so we have that connection. So as a staff liaison to the community trail, which is a former railroad bed through the city that we've turned into a rail trail, we've started adding art. So one of our first examples was actually random, don't know who did it, but the bigger picture kind of started that emphasis, and then some city projects that have been through volunteer organizations that have come to us and said, hey, we want to have a staff on today and work on your trail and do community service. What can we do? And one of them is the Northeast Color, which is a very artistic company, obviously, and they love to provide murals and sculptures. So all of those examples are taking a kind of scarier Silver Street tunnel that we call it, and making a mural to try to deter graffiti and just trying to help with the placemaking in these different manners. So other ideas for art that we're working on currently is, you might be familiar up in Booth Bay, they have these guardians kind of sculptures out of wood chips, and so something similar to that with the community trail committee wanting art of kind of more natural materials, including possibly bug hotels or retired recycled materials such as tire sculptures are items that we're looking at. And we also are about to have an RFP come out for a art sculpture or something similar for one of our new trailheads off of 4th Street. So another example is the Dover 400, this painting our crosswalks, which you might have seen in other communities, but to help celebrate our Dover 400, our crosswalks will be painted. And then sticking with the community trail, later on this fall, we're hoping to do an event of Dover art shop competition and letting the children come kind of take photos and have an event on our community trail like this. one of my personal goals is to have these artwork, or rainworks it's called, and it's certain art that you put on cement that only shows up when it rains. So that's something we're looking into on our concrete sidewalks. And then we are also one of 5 communities in North America that is getting a Voyage Mark II, and this is an installation of the solar system, very to scale along our new section of our community trail, because it needed to be 2,000 linear feet long. Starts with the sun and ends with Pluto, and it would be a educational tool as well as kind of an economic driver in terms of people coming, because we are the only one in the event that is receiving this. You might have seen in Foster's that the Ninja Turtles has a tie to Dover, and we're looking at trying to have a piece of artwork using a storm drain in front of where the studio used to be. So that's one of our projects coming up that we're working on. And this is an example of a different community, but Bloomberg has certain art grants throughout the year that we've applied for, and we will continue to apply for kind of asphalt, and whether it's painting sidewalks or doing some traffic calming using art. And then of course the Dover 400 waterfront development was just approved a week or so ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, and an entire art plan is working. So we have that committee working with our arts commission to make sure that art is a part of that project, just like any other project. And that's all I have for that question.
So we just heard from Donna about everything going on in Dover and how they've been integrating public art, how that's supported by the Arts Commission. We're going to look to Matt, who's long been a champion of public access to art, and hoping you can talk a little bit about how that's ingrained in the mission of the Rochester Museum of Fine Arts, and talking a little bit about other efforts in the city in relation to placemaking and public art in the downtown and around the city.
It's a lot of ground to cover. First, I am so excited to see some of those slides, and I plan on fully stealing a lot of those ideas and abstracting them to make sure that they happen in Rochester. How's that for agreeing with? So, specifically, I'm sorry. Specifically, when it comes to accessibility of art, there's a lot of ways that I can define that. But the first is the most simple, is to make sure that we put art, or at least our mission at the Rochester MFA is to put art in unexpected places. So we looked at public buildings originally about 10 years ago. We started looking at public buildings because they were empty and there was nothing on the walls. And if you remember the community center, there's some people from Rochester in here that's probably remember the community center. It was the former high school, and where the lockers were just white cinder block walls for miles and miles and miles, and nothing was really happening there. It was sort of like, the building was sort of like the Wild West, actually. It was just sort of different tenants that had taken over different areas of the school, and so a lot of traffic in and out of there. And actually in the last year, we moved our tax collector and auto registration office over to the second floor of the building, which means everyone has to see art now when they come in. So, but that's really important to us because we, sometimes we talk about art at a really high level, but that's not always necessarily accessible to the people that live in our communities. And when we started the Art Museum in Rochester, as maybe some of you, people laughed at us. They thought, well, why would you ever do that here? And we were just so determined to outlive that sort of opinion. And we started to look at the community center, specifically in our public library, actually, because like I said, the walls were empty and we knew that the building had a lot of traffic. But not only that, we looked at the tenants that were in the building, and in the Foley Center specifically, we have the rec department, which serves a lot of disenfranchised families, kids specifically, that are coming through there. There's also the food pantry, the Share Fund, which is a wonderful organization that we're lucky to have in the building. We have DHHS, we have an alternative high school. We also have a Head Start program in there, just to name a few. There's also some great organizations like Haven and the Family Justice Center. If, yeah, oh, yeah. You guys are great neighbors. So happy to see you here today. We also have the Stratford Regional Plan. If you couldn't tell by the heckling from the front table. But from the list that I just provided you, you can probably assume safely that a lot of these families do not have access to fiber. Even getting to an institution like the Courier, which is a great museum in Manchester, is cost prohibitive. Not only the ticket to get in there, but just the transportation to get there is not possible for a lot of the families that live in our region. So when we talk about art accessibility, it's more about art exposure to some. That, you know, and even growing up in Rochester, because I'm from here, I was born here, graduated from Spalding High School. I don't ever remember going into any of my friends' houses and seeing fine art on the walls above the couch. It just didn't exist. It doesn't exist. And to some of us, we're used to seeing this all the time, and it is a normal thing for us because we're in this world. And you know, it's just not a reality for most families in America. So when you go into the community center now, you see art everywhere. And one of my favorite stories, and I'll try to be quick because I know you have other panelists over here. One of my favorite stories is there's also a dojo upstairs, so there's all kinds of people. And are they here too? No? One of my favorite stories is there was I assume a dad and his son walking down the hall, and I was working and doing something. It was late, you know, things were kind of closing up, and I didn't hear the first part of the conversation, but I heard the father answer a question. He said, "Well, son, that's what we call abstract art." And at first I thought, what a complete, but then I realized how great that was because they just had a conversation about art at the community center and how that likely would not have happened had we not put that art on. So whether they liked it or not, they had a conversation and experience that they may have never had. And that's why I care about art accessibility. In another way, it's about how we talk about art. It's about the environment. I think from my experience too, from growing up here, just anything, I'm sure a lot of you can relate to this, is we don't always feel welcome in art institutions. It's, you know, it's a little snobby maybe, at least that's how we perceive it. Doesn't really feel that accessible to everyone. Maybe the way that I'm dressed wouldn't be the way that you know, you feel comfortable in a place like that. And the thing that's great about our institution, if you could call it that, is the fact that anybody can come in, and on any given weekend, there are 100 kids with basketball jerseys walking up and down the hallway trying to find their favorite painting. And to me, that's successful. And we'll never be the Courier. Courier is a great institution, but that's not what we're trying to be. We're trying to make art of all variety palatable to people that might not otherwise care about it, and start those conversations. Not only in the community center are we doing this, but we're doing it around the city. Why limit ourselves to one location when we can cover up boarded windows with murals and art installations, when we can, you know, cover the ground of an empty park with sculptures that welcome people to our downtown, that hopefully support our local economy and just make things look a little nicer for everyone. And what you're doing in Dover is really impressive, and that's exactly what we should be doing in all of these areas, is just brightening things up and making them more vibrant so we can support our local economy. So I hope that answers the question. It's meandering at best.
Thanks to Matt, and especially for talking about the equity and accessibility piece, which is so important. We are going to be moving on to our second round. So obviously, all of these awesome projects and ideas take funding and volunteers and staff who are passionate about this to find a way to integrate it into what our cities and towns are doing. So we're going to be looking at what information and resources there are for communities seeking to integrate public art into their community planning and into their towns and cities. So we're going to go back to Chris. And I would like you to tell the audience a little bit about your role with New Hampshire Creative Communities Network, kind of looking at the work they do and the resources they offer. We'll start with that. Oh yeah, you don't need the mics.
Sure. So hopefully you know that there is the New Hampshire Creative Communities Network. Anybody who does not know that? Anyone? All right. Well, we'll fix that. There is a group of, it's a membership organization where we have cross-sector, it's a consortium of cross-sector individuals who sort of connect and educate leaders and people in other sectors about the potential of integrating arts and culture strategies into infrastructures. And at the root of it, or at the core of it, is really the idea of building partnerships. It's very easy on paper for us to sort of look at an organizational chart and see who should be with whom, right? And assume what that relationship would be. You would, and I see your badge there, you there, oh, that. However, the dynamics that come from any relationship always reveal unknown potential, right? And so the Creative Communities Network puts together a series of discussions, convenings. In fact, there's a free one on Zoom next Tuesday morning at 10:30, and I will provide you the information. We're going to explore difficult questions surrounding creative placemaking. And rather than have a panel, we sort of assume everybody's invited at the table because everybody's got thoughts, everybody's got questions. And so we at Creative Communities Network try to sort of embody it and emulate the field of creative placemaking, which again is a very ambiguous term. It isn't something that can be narrowed down to a very finite definition. But the idea is to get a lot of people with different ideas and with different perspectives and different skill sets in a space where they talk freely. And more importantly, they ask questions and they listen to each other. So we have a series of convenings we're calling Round the Table. We're also going to be piloting projects hopefully this fall, where we're partnering creative placemakers and different communities, or we're going to help facilitate that or provoke that, such that some of this, or much of this, isn't just dialogue. We want dialogue to turn into something actionable, the things that you all are doing, right? And rather than that, we just view that being born from getting people within the community from all sectors, not necessarily thinking they have anything to contribute to an art project or a creative placemaking project, but making sure that they're heard and they're provoked. They are proactive to kind of speak with other people within their community and see what comes of that.
And also hoping you can talk a little bit about your role with the New Hampshire Institute of Art and any programming you've been involved with looking into creative placemaking.
Sure. So as an educator, I took a brief hiatus from teaching and mistakenly became a dean of community education, which I love what we were trying to do, but it's just not my forte. I much prefer a classroom. But in that time, we created a partnership with a consortium of creative placemaking, which was based in New Jersey under the leadership of Leo Vasquez, who's an amazing planner and creative placemaker. And so we developed a certificate program, and Michelle is here as one of our graduates of that program. And it was a 10-month program, very intense, with experts and teachers from all around the country. And it was very choreographed to offer structure, but in a way that really, hopefully you felt this, you were invited to bring what your community needs, your questions, your personal perspective into the program, which became the culminating capstone project. That program, though the New Hampshire Institute of Art has gone away and has merged, and now I work for New England College, and that program no longer exists with us. The National Consortium of Creative Placemaking has now morphed into an organization called creative placemaking communities. And Leo Vasquez is still at the helm, and it's a much more sort of organic organization, and they still run a certificate program. When I ran that program, we sort of looked, we marketed it, and we accepted people into the program from all sectors. We had working artists in there, so we had planners in there, we had landscape designers in there, we had a nightclub owner in there, we had people from tourism. And the idea was, let's enrich the conversation. And again, the goal, not just conversation, but how does this turn into actionable projects, actionable sort of plans that then go back, these folks go back to their communities and not only do these projects, but also kind of seed this sort of and cultivate a culture of creative placement.
Thank you. We're gonna move back to Donna. You touched a little bit about this in the previous round, looking at some of the ways the city has funded projects, looking at having that integrated plan review projects come to the planning board, and some of the sources like Bloomberg that you've applied to. But can you talk about any additional resources or kind of how the city has created this initiative to budget these types of projects?
Thank you. So the projects in the private projects in the downtown would be paid for by the developer. So that's just part of our site plan criteria. You need to provide the artwork and it has to be the satisfaction of the planning department and arts commission. In terms of the city run ones, we certainly have a budget and the arts commission has a yearly budget for arts, probably not enough a budget, that's every case. And in terms of trying to seek out grants and using partnerships for the solar system is using recreation or school impact fees, which because it's a new installation, it's close walking distance to at least 2 of our schools, and we're able to use that kind of funding. So it's kind of taking a variety of resources. So it's not just taking from one pool, but using partnerships, using grants such as the Bloomberg Art Grant or the Rainworks, I think is like $250 to get you started. So it doesn't take much. It takes also the volunteers and the partnerships with Northeast Color or Liberty Mutual in terms of the trail cleanups and maintaining some of our murals and sculptures once they're completed so that they're staying up to date and maintained and painting over graffiti and just trying to make sure that it stays crisp and just in general looking good as part of the placemaking. So yeah, I'd say grants, our own budget, using volunteers and impact fees.
And just to follow up, are there any additional trainings or resources that you've used to kind of point to the importance of public art?
Yes, so there are many resources. I have a couple, I can figure out, here we go. If I can figure out the clicker, but some resources are up here, certainly New Hampshire Council for the Arts. The American for the Arts is our organization that I referenced when talking about the survey that we're completing this year, as well as an Our Town grant. I know the Arts Commission has applied for before. There's the Northern New England chapter of the American Planning Association, which is Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont planners get together. And this fall, we're going to have a similar session that goes into this discussion of the arts in Dover, but also the partnership and kind of diving deeper into this topic. And then I know LISC has several creative placemaking webinars. The National Endowment for the Arts is certainly one. The placemaking certificate, the Bloomberg has the asphalt art grant as well as another one. They have at least 2 throughout the year. So certainly lots of different organizations and partnerships can go and help with this. And then certainly I would take your own talent pool from your own communities. Artists are out here and want to get involved.
Okay, we're gonna go back to Matt for our last question before we open up for some questions for the panel. So looking for you to detail what Rochester has done in terms of resources to get its arts programming up and running, art in the downtown, and looking at any opportunities for other communities to leverage or collaborate with the Rochester Museum of Fine Arts.
Yes, so In our city, we have been very fortunate to have a lot of support from our city council and our mayors and city administration for public art. Our economic development department actually has a budget for public art specifically, which we utilize every penny as best we can. The art museum, we have no budget at all. We're in the hallways of an old high school, and you know, so it doesn't really cost a lot for us to do that. It's not to say that money's not involved. Certainly we use some of that budget for training and reimbursements, things like that. Painting, you know, all kinds of different projects. But what we've tried to do is use that money wisely and install public art, sculptures, murals, things like that. We've also done vinyl applications, which are great because there's no long-term maintenance plan for that. Once it's done, you peel it off and you start again, and it leaves no mark behind. And there's a lot of different ways to sort of incorporate public art into your downtown, especially as you saw. But some of the resources that we provide at the museum is for people to copy us. We you know, artists are everywhere, art lovers are everywhere, even if they don't know it yet. All over the state, all over the region. Art belongs everywhere, not just in our bigger cities, in Boston or Portland, or but in all communities like Rochester and Somersworth and Dover. And we welcome people at our museum to come in and take a look at what we've done and literally copy us, you know, and we will tell you how we did it. And we will make suggestions, and I hope that people can even capitalize on that and improve on it. Maybe they have more access to funding than we do. But if you have a community center or a library or just a wall like this one, you can turn that into an opportunity for your local artists to show their work, but also make art accessible to the people that live around you. And it doesn't always require a lot of funding. Listen, if I had to raise $1 million conservatively, let's try it, with it hyperinflation, let's go $10 million. It wouldn't have happened. It just wouldn't have happened. We wouldn't have found the backers. We wouldn't have found, certainly we would not have city funding. I don't even think I would want to take city funding, taxpayer dollars that much to do something like that. If we needed a building, if we needed to do everything ourselves that way, it just wouldn't have happened. We saw the community center as an opportunity, and we started hanging art, and people seem to like it. That can be done anywhere. So check out your public libraries, check out your city halls, town halls, community centers, and look for those opportunity spaces and get some volunteers together and find some of those local artists. They're everywhere. And they're looking for these types of exhibit opportunities all the time. So it's an easy way to incorporate art into any community. And we encourage, like I said, we encourage people to copy that idea as much and as often as possible. It's okay to applaud.
Okay, thank you so much to all of our panelists. We learned a lot about how art isn't a one-size-fits-all approach, how public art can mean many different things and be displayed in many different ways. We heard about what's going on in Rochester and Dover and the importance of equity and accessibility in art and bringing that to everyone, all residents in the communities. And also about some of the trainings and the resources that other communities can use to integrate art into their towns and cities. So we will turn it over to questions from the group, if anyone has any questions.
You talked, Donna, about it's in the planning, I don't know if it's requirements or I don't know what to call them, when a new developer comes to the city of Dover, it's a requirement that they have some type of an art installation. We were referring specifically to a physical art installation, but we heard a lot from all panelists that art takes many forms. If a developer was interested maybe incorporating a performance venue or something, would you be open to that, or does it have to be a physical?
No, any sort of art or culture would be an option, and they would just have to work with the planning department and arts commission to kind of figure out the logistics and how often performances or anything. But yes, certainly if it's a performing arts space, we would take that into consideration and agree with that.
And a follow-up on graffiti has come up, and it's it's an issue with Dover, I'm sure it's been, we had a call at the chamber about it yesterday. And you talked about covering up the graffiti, but have I heard talk maybe from the Arts Commissioner, maybe incorporating graffiti as an art form and giving those
Yes.
artists a way to express themselves?
So there's 2 locations that we're currently working on to have an art graffiti wall, which is basically a permitted, if you want to tag or have an opportunity to do some graffiti, we're going to have a building which is going to turn into a wall along our community trail, which has been a popular ask. So we're working with the Arts Commission, as well as we now have a graffiti management committee in the city of Dover, and they are very gung-ho to get started to both erase graffiti and tagging where it shouldn't be, but also to provide this opportunity. So we are currently working on an MOU with the property owner on that one on the trail. And then as well as we are having a new skate park, which is under construction this summer, and we are looking at providing a similar opportunity there as well. So there's at least 2 opportunities in the very near future for graffiti walls.
For Jeff, so Donna, long time, don't right. We'll celebrate the 350th, so I haven't seen 400. Growing up in Dover, Morrow Building, what I call the Square. So when they got repainted, it was a big fervor as to the art that was on the facade. Who defines what is art and what is, Chris's comments, it's art meant to help communicate, but it's what some people want to communicate. How do you regulate what is art, what is not art, what is acceptable, what is acceptable?
Great question. So just to rephrase it, how do you determine what's acceptable to one might not be to another, because art is so subjective. And that's why everything needs to be approved by the planning department as well as the arts commissions. That we have 2 entities that are kind of looking over it and approving it and making sure. So we don't really have like a policy guideline to say this is allowed, this isn't, but that is something that we're working on specifically for the graffiti walls. And so when we talk about First Right Amendments and First Amendment rights, and just in general, how do you go about policing that or making a determination of that might not be a message that we want kids to see, or that might not be a message we just want in our community in general. So it is a balancing act, and I think having 2 entities and kind of a clear policy or guidance that is clear to everyone and advertised helps with that. But it does get a little gray at times.
Yeah, this is really for all 3 of the panelists, but I'm interested in your perspective on the public art in relationship to maintenance or care. You just mentioned graffiti sometimes, right? Public art could be tagged, or particularly in an open space. So curious about your perspective on that, and maybe materials or things that you might consider, an artist might consider to mitigate that or allow that to be easier to maintain. And then the other thing, maybe it's more for Donna and the experience in Dover. So if I'm a developer and I'm asked to do, and maybe I select, and we work collaboratively and we do a public art. So is the developer then responsible for maintaining that, or the city, and how does that work? And maybe that's part of your MOUs and so forth.
Yeah, so in general, yes, it is their artwork and they're providing it for the public, but it is their responsibility to maintain and replace, make sure it is staying maintained and looking good for a long term. And then in terms of just trying to tier graffiti, there are certain materials or ways we can do it. So I know there's a couple buildings that have recently come through the planning board and planning department that are along like the railroad tracks. And we're making sure at the technical review level, right off the bat, that certain materials are chosen to try to deter and not just invite graffiti and tagging in those situations, and then using landscaping as well to try to deter it, and then certain materials that are easier to scrub off. So all of our wayfinding signs, we have a specific cleaning and maintenance policy and plan, and those were specifically chosen to try to deter graffiti or at least have it easily removed if possible. There are like clear coats you can put on that are graffiti resistant, but those are usually cost prohibitive, so we try to use some of these other techniques.
Yeah, maintenance, long-term maintenance is really important, actually. And just because you have funding today to do a mural, doesn't mean you're going to have it in 5 or 10 years when the paint is flaking off and it's faded and it needs to be replaced. I love painted murals and sculptures and things, but one thing that we started to do here in Rochester is work with a graphics company to do vinyl applications. And within the last couple of years, we started doing this expansion of public art where we would actually pay a stipend to an artist for their digital file and then send that file to the printing company, the graphics company that would apply it on the wall in vinyl. And actually, the process is really interesting because, especially on a historic building, because you wouldn't necessarily want to paint something onto a historic building that you don't have a long-term plan for. Or really at all, you know, in some cases, really, you might not want to do that at all. There's other areas. So what they do basically is it's a big sticker and they enlarge the art and they stick it onto the wall and then they apply heat to it about 900 degrees. And it takes all the air out from behind it. So if you're on a brick wall, for instance, which we have a lot of in our mill towns, is you apply the heat and it just, like, I don't know the right words. Yeah, it's sort of like, you know, and then suddenly you can see all the texture of the brick and the grout, and it looks almost as if it was painted on. So much so that I've been able to fool many. And it's also very affordable. So with a $10,000 budget, we are able to do a lot more than you would if you were to hire an artist to be out there for the entire summer painting this painstakingly in the sun and everything. It costs a lot more to do that, and they deserve every penny. It's a lot of work.
So what happens if that got tagged?
You wash it off.
Oh, you just wash it?
Yeah, you wash it off. That's what's great about the surface. It's also UV covered too. So it can sit in the sun for years and years and not fade or peel. But when you get to the point where you're, you know, maybe tired of looking at it, or maybe it is starting to peel after 10 years or so, you apply that same amount of heat to it and you literally peel it off the wall and it leaves no trace behind. So when we're talking about the integrity of our historic buildings downtown, the vinyl application is a pretty good solution for that. It's affordable, it supports a local artist, they didn't have to do a whole lot of work, they've already made the art, they're just selling you the file to be copied once onto a building for an undetermined amount of time. But it also cuts out that maintenance fee. If in 10 years I'm not around, say I get hit by a bus or better yet, win the lottery and leave, nobody's stuck with this maintenance. They can, like I said, peel it off and they can go in another direction if that's the case at that time.
I just add one more thing. There's also, as an alternative, on the heels of that, the potential of putting in the brief, this may get tagged. And what I mean by that is a creative mind in an RFP might sort of create something that being potentially tagged or looking at the patina. I mean, we love our patina sculptures, right? So the material, that metal is used knowing what will happen over time. If you just take that and you imagine sort of in an RFP situation, putting that, the context, the foreshadowing context of what may happen into the artist's brain, I have a feeling that there are a lot of creative people who will come up with things that none of us can think of right now, where we don't have to protect the art as if it's one thing today, we have to keep it that forever. You know what I mean? So that's, it's a little bit off the track,
Yeah.
but I think that there's potential for that as well. in art school, for instance, I have a student who graduated in 2012. She has religiously painted this piece of wood, coated it with a piece of a coating of paint every day. She swears it's, she checks in every night. The thing is down like 60 pounds. It's only this big. I don't know if it's a great piece of art, but my point being, here's somebody who paints over something, and all of a sudden is the creation is the responding to the material. I'm not saying it's a great piece of art, right? But what I'm saying is there's the potential of taking a different viewpoint of an art piece in a public space, taking into consideration not just wear and tear, but also the context in which people live around it.
I was, excuse me, I was in Dallas back in September, and my son lives there. Now, I don't know, this is what he told me. That's how it works. There is tons of mural art as you walk through the streets of Dallas. Nobody's tagging it because the taggers are now vying for the opportunity to be involved in the mural art. They don't want their stuff tagged, so they're not tagging anybody else's. Some of it is public and some of it is private. The public murals and work, they're on a rotating basis. They're up for a period of time. And whether it's the process that you described or whether it's someone, they come down, somebody else puts their artwork up. But there are prints made, and those prints are then available for people to purchase, which in part goes to support the artists and part goes to support the program. On some of the private buildings, the ones that I noticed that impressed me were music venues. Instead of having a marquee, there's an artist rendition of the musician or the band or whatever that is out there for if they have a resident musician for a period of time. That's who goes on there. So they're there for a month or however long they're going to be in residency in that venue. And it's brilliant. I mean, you just, whether it's, jazz musician or folk or whatever the genre is, that person's artistic rendition of them is there for that period of time. And it was absolutely marvelous. And those change on a more regular basis because of the artist comes in on a regular, the new artist comes in on a regular basis. So, but there were private ones, furniture store, how boring can you get with the side of your building? But, if they want to have somebody put a mural on there, they can leave it up for as long as they want. And it was just amazing. It was all through the city.
Public art does tend to, at least in my experience here in Rochester, like I tend to notice your point is that the more art that we have, it doesn't really get tagged. And I do want to make a distinction here about graffiti. Graffiti is a legitimate form of art. There is a difference, however, between graffiti and vandalism. What we're talking about here today, I think, is vandalism. Tagging is vandalism. It's not offering anything to anyone. It is there just for the purpose of taking away from the community that they probably complain about living in. But the more we beautify, the more we add legitimate forms of art like graffiti or any kind of street art or sculpture to our communities. I find, at least in my experience, that we have less and less of this vandalism that's happening. I do see it moving sort of out away from, because we've started in our downtown center, and I notice that the vandalism is moving further and further out, which just means that I have to also move further and further out, which is great because our downtown is in revitalization. We are developing rapidly, things are changing, new businesses are moving in all the time, and we also want to make sure that the outskirts of our downtown are welcoming to people that are visiting for the first time, or residents that are going out to eat or whatever they might be doing downtown. So it just means we need more public art to push it out and perhaps give people opportunities that are working on graffiti, which is real art, you know, to give them opportunities like a graffiti wall is a great idea. Portland has a great graffiti wall too. Give them a venue. And I think you'll see a reduction in that kind of vandalism that no business wants to have to put up with.
There was I don't know if you've ever heard of Eddie Rama. Eddie Rama is an artist who then turned into a mayor in a major city in Albania. And forgive me, I forget the city. And he did a TED Talk during his time there. I think he has recently been investigated for embezzlement, so don't look him up. But the old Eddie. No, but in this TED Talk, he talks about sort of being in a leadership position in this city, right? Where because of war and because of a variety of reasons, there's high crime, there's litter apparently was a horrible problem, and unemployment was skyrocketing. Right? And you look at pictures of the city in his talk, and you see these concrete buildings with a lot of bullet holes and all this kind of stuff. And it just was great. Not just the building, but the picture was great, right? The only thing that he had as a resource, and he embellished a little bit in the TED Talk, and I probably will here too, was paint. And so every neighborhood was invited to just paint their building. That's it. Bright colors, right? Pastel blues, corals, and all of this. And you start seeing neighborhoods compete with each other and start to develop, I don't know if it's art in a classic sense, but develop patterns and motifs that don't depict anything, but and I'm not sure they beautify the buildings. They're still pretty, not my thing. But at the same time, they paint it. And you cannot draw a direct line. But in that talk, he says the litter problem started to go away within 3 to 5 years. Unemployment went down to a more, not great, but not a horrible level. And the crime rate dropped, right? And what one can extrapolate from that, one of the things that he was promoting was the idea of the sense of pride. And I bring that up because the difference you bring up between tagging and graffiti, in both cases, there's an element of wanting to make a mark, right? To be a part of something. And so I think art, to your question earlier about who decides what art is, well, I don't know if these buildings were big art murals. I don't know what it was, but it was a creative act. Maybe we can get rid of the word art or just put it aside for a moment and think about the creative efforts that make change, that all of a sudden affect the behaviors and the psychology of all of us around, which I think to some extent is what you're talking about. It's a great TED Talk.
Yeah, thank you. I was wondering, so I've been in New Hampshire for almost 6 years, moved here from away, most recently Columbus, Ohio. And coming into our communities, working with local boards and commissions, it strikes me that at least a lot of the communities that I work with are maybe a little bit more conscious of their history and where we've been over time than maybe other parts of the country are. Dover, approaching 400 years, is one of the oldest settled European communities in the United States. And I think alongside that question of who gets to decide what counts as art is who gets to decide when things can change and how. And so I was wondering whether you could touch on how art can be a way of remembering or keeping or embracing the old, but also be a way of introducing something new, and how the new and old can live side by side.
We just had an 85-foot mural painted inside our community center, and one of the first questions that the artist asked at the first meeting was, what sort of historical landmarks or what kind of iconic pieces from Rochester should I incorporate into this? And I said, none, because this is the new history. you are painting the next thing that people are going to remember 30 years from now. I didn't want him to stifle his creativity based on something that he thought that he had to incorporate. Now, there is a place for that, you know. We have these rich histories in all these different communities, and you can incorporate that in so many different ways, but I think it's important to also make new memories. And that's just my perspective. But
Similarly, we try to do both in Dover, so it's up to the artists, it's up to the community, and we also try to do the outreach so that all the other committees and volunteers know what's going on, so that there is that time for public feedback. But we're specifically talking about a statue or some sort of art to commemorate the 400th, but we also recognize that's the colonialism of the 400th, that's not really the beginning of that area and residents in that area. So we want to make sure that we're doing something to represent both, and then as well of keeping up with times and not just looking back, but certainly going forward. And that's why we're embracing change and embracing, you know, I don't know too many communities that are strongly encourage developers to come in with a public art concept to us. So I think in general, just being able to change and having the willingness to change, but also still remembering our past and how we got here.
Your question and your responses make me think of like, what do we want the art to do? Let's not worry about what it is. In Manchester, there's a beautiful sculpture by Ernie Montenegro, great sculptor, great guy. I think it costs $150,000. I don't remember exactly. A lot of private donors, some, I don't know where all the money came from, but anyway, it's sitting on Granite Street, right? You should go see it. Problem is, how are you going to get there? You're going to drive by it at 45 miles an hour while you're trying not to get hit because it's a very dangerous little area to walk through. There's also a bar that's known for a few shootings right behind it. It's on a little patch of green that's very well manicured, but I bring classes there all the time because I teach a class on social practice. And it takes us, it is an effort. It's like Frogger trying to get around the road, get across the road to get there. And once you're there, it's the symbolic gesture to the blue collar, hardworking men and women that have built Manchester. It's a beautiful sentiment, and it is a gorgeous piece of work. I mean, it is beautiful, right? But what does it do? What does Manchester, with $150,000, what creative thing could be done that Manchester needs, right? What could be done that maybe isn't as showy or as classically art, and doesn't actually even look like public art, but actually encourages sort of people to be more engaged with their community. That's what I think of when that, and I think it follows on what you're thinking. One of the greatest creative placemaking things I've seen is, like, again, it's not in a rural situation, it's in Detroit, but there were a row of like abandoned storefronts, and there was different communities in that neighborhood, and they just made, there were different people that would make food or little crafts and sort of sell them in these storefronts. They cleaned them up themselves, and somebody would be in a different storefront every Friday. And all of a sudden, that little stretch of road became a destination for people to come check things out. And all of a sudden, this was an entrepreneurial opportunity for a lot of immigrant people who, in the immigrant community, who had no other way of sort of growing their, either their business or had no idea of having a business. And I think about those kinds of things, which are perhaps a little bit more the objects or the creative effort impacts behavior rather than just the object and its symbolism.
another thing that I think of too about the history and stuff is often people will come up to me, and they're not wrong, but often people will say, you're a hard worker, I love it, but I hate all the shit that you're putting all over the city. Couldn't you do something about the shoe mills or our history, And when I think about that, it's like, well, what exactly are we commemorating when we look back to, say, a shoe mill? First of all, none of them are left, they're gone. And the ones that are gone are housing now, which is great, because they've been repurposed. But these were not great places to work for. There was child labor, people with, it wasn't a great work environment. Long hours, not great work, you know, and it's just like, to me, it's like, do I really want to commemorate something that it's not just gone, but long gone, and isn't really that great of a memory, in my opinion. History is important, incorporating that in is important, but do we really need to? Or can we, you know, maybe move on?
Do one more question.
Anybody else? Matt, you just actually addressed what's been kind of going through my mind, but Professor Archer, your opening comments, you used the word beauty, and Matt, you talked about beautifying these spaces. And I was gonna ask, does art, like you just referenced, have a place? You talked about the beautiful sculpture, and I'm thinking of, there's a Holocaust sculpture in the Baltimore waterfront. Is it beautiful? I mean, what is art supposed to do? And is there a place for that type of art that tells a story, but maybe doesn't make you happy or isn't beautiful, but does that have a place?
No.
But you were very eloquent to what you just said about the mills. I'm like, oh, yeah.
Well, I'll take what I can get on that. But the thing is that art is however it makes you feel. People will say all the time, well, art is subjective, that means they don't like it. But really it is subjective, and it's whatever it means to you, or like a memorial like that. It's art, you know. For most of the time, rich people have told us what art is. We need to blow that up. You know, it's what you think, it's what you think, it's what you think. And that's all that really matters. And you might love it, you might hate it, but it's no less meaningful to whoever it's touching. And you know, just because these big institutions or people with deep pockets say that it matters, doesn't mean it does. It's what matters to you. Not as eloquent, but no further questions.
No. Just an observation, it's just art brings people together. That's the point.
Yeah.
And, you know, people talk, just get people gathered, and especially in these times, I think art is a really good place to help them. Just
Awesome.
You good with that question?
That's awesome. That's exactly what it should be.
Do you want to drop the mic?
Okay, we could give a huge round of applause to our panelists. Welcome to sit back at your table or sit up here. We're gonna have Michael Arthur Jackson come up and talk a little bit about an arts and culture project that we're working on at the Planning Commission, mapping different arts and culture sites in our region.
Hi everyone, I'm Jackson Rand, I'm the GIS planner at SRPC. Colin Lentz is down here manning the computer. Thank you, Colin. He's going to pull up our arts and culture inventory we've been working on. And Colin, while I'm talking about this, if you could just click through some of the tabs and click on some of the points so you can get a demonstration of what's going on here. So we recently completed this arts and culture mapping inventory, in which we inventoried as many arts and culture sites in the SRPC region that we could find on our own. Right now we have over 200 sites in this inventory, but we have found that a lot of these sites are not in any current data source. They're not easily Googleable, and we've been finding that we definitely need assistance in completing this. But what we have right now is what Colin's clicking through. We've divided these sites into a bunch of different categories that you see across the top. So we have historic sites throughout the region. We have community sites, which include any kind of community center, library, or public gathering space. We have a retail category, which highlights any retail establishment in the area that sells anything related to arts and culture. Events, so any Christmas parades, farmers markets, other festivals that communities might host during the summer, those are all included here. We've included arts commissions, music commissions, any sort of clubs or groups within our communities that fall under an arts and culture focus. Education includes anywhere you may go to take musical lessons or art classes. Public art and memorials. A all of the public art that Donna was talking about. Any art installations at business establishments are included here as well. And then museums, venues, and galleries. This is going to include any museums, art studios, art galleries, music venues, comedy clubs, anything like that. And lastly, we have agritourism, which is going to be like pick your own produce, apple picking, pumpkin patches, a lot of fall type of events. So this is an overview of what we've included. Like Colin's been doing, you can click on all of the sites that are shown here. And for every site, there's a link that you can click on to get more information about this site. We're in the process of collecting photographs right now. So come the end of the summer, this fall, when you click on these sites, you'll see photographs for all of them. Building this online viewer, Shayna has done a lot of assistance with outreach to some of our municipalities. We've gotten a lot of assistance from the Explore Moose Mountains organization for several municipalities here. And Stephen Geis and Mark Davey this summer are going out to take pictures of all these sites for us. As I said, we've found that there's a lot that we're missing. So Colin, if you could go to the last tab, it's hidden on here right now. Yeah, right there. So the last tab of this viewer has a little survey that anyone can go into, and they can submit sites to be nominated to be added to this inventory. So at current, this inventory is live. You can find it on the front of our ARC Online site. You can also find it on our SRPC webpage. We are seeking help from municipal staff, community leaders, or anyone with an arts and culture focus to come on in here and submit nominations for new sites that we can add to our inventory. That is the really quick and dirty version of what we're doing and what we've launched today. This was just launched today, so it's brand new. If you have any questions, please come see me afterwards, or you can email or call me anytime. And I don't know if we have time for questions now.
Good to see you afterwards.
Okay, see me afterwards if you have any questions. Thank you.
And I'll just add. Jackson said that, we're starting to build this out. We were lucky to be able to use EDA CARES Act funding in the spirit of recovery and encouraging people to go to these sites. Ideally, in the future, we'd be able to apply for funding to make this a really comprehensive resource. So it is a starting point, so if things are missing, like Jackson said, we're looking for that input. I'm going to turn it over to Jen, and we're going to have a letter read from Senator Shaheen, and then our annual awards following.
So I'm the last person between you and the exit door, so I'll try and keep it as brief as I can. So as Shayna said, I do have a letter from Senator Shaheen that I'd like to read, but beforehand, I just want to recognize all of our staff and commissioners who make this possible. So if our staff could all stand up and say hello. I know many times you may only communicate with them virtually, and so this is probably one of the first times getting to meet some of our staff members, many of which started during the pandemic, and so haven't actually been in a full in-office, in-person environment. As Dave noted at the beginning, we have not had an annual meeting, live since 2019. So today was our first venture back into doing a live, larger in-person event since March 2020. I'd also like to recognize our commissioners who are here today. If you could all stand up so we can see who you all are as well. And it's the dedication of our commissioners and their volunteerism that make us feasible and make it possible to do what we do. We here as staff, we're your staff. We work to help make your communities better places. And so we are very grateful for all that you do and the time you spend with us. So on that note, I will read our letter from Senator Shaheen. Really pulls together some of the things that kind of came out at the end of the conversation here about the importance of arts and culture in our communities. And so she writes, "Dear friends, I wish I could join you all for the first in-person annual meeting of the Stratford Regional Planning Commission since 2019. Thank you to staff and supporters for your incredible efforts to better the lives of so many in the local community. Your work is vital to the success of our region and our state. The Planning Commission provides resources and services that impact countless residents and businesses in the many communities you serve. From your advocacy of alternative modes of transportation to your assistance to local communities in the recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. Your expertise and guidance are essential to communities in their efforts to strengthen their local economies and enrich the social and cultural prosperity of their citizens. I'm excited about this year's theme of public art and creative placemaking, as it is important for the betterment of our vibrant and expanding Granite State communities. The prioritizing of public art and creative placemaking promotes smart, sustainable, and efficient community planning while ultimately contributing to the beauty and economic development of our state. The Stratford Regional Planning Commission is a leader in this area, and your work on this topic continues to unite and strengthen communities in the region. I wish you all the best for a productive, informative, and enjoyable annual meeting. Please don't hesitate to reach out if my office can assist you at your work. Sincerely, Gigi. So, in the spirit of recognizing volunteers and the importance that that plays to the Planning Commission and the betterment of our communities, this year for our annual board, we decided to recognize volunteers within our communities that are particularly engaged with the SRPC Planning Commission. So first, we want to recognize, and I think we can probably go to the next slide there. First, we'd like to recognize Wayne Burton. Wayne has served for many years as an SRPC commissioner. In fact, his volunteerism on the Planning Commission predates most of us. So we couldn't actually find his start date. Sorry, Wayne. Wayne's also served as a town council member, a state legislator, and is a tireless advocate and member of the Community College Education Network. And those are things that he brought all together as a commissioner for Stratford Regional Planning Commission. And we were really sad last fall when his community college passion pulled him away from us. And he went up to Maine to serve in an interim position leading the Eastern Maine Community College up in Bangor. So we've missed his voice at the table, and we wanted to recognize him for all that he has done for Stratford Regional Planning Commission. He's been an executive committee member. He's been a tireless voice at the table. He is a model commissioner, always making sure to advocate both within his community and at the Planning Commission level, at the regional level, making sure that those voices are tied together and the communication happens between the two. He's been integral in trying to advance some of the local transportation projects and help get them through the system, providing valuable insight into our comprehensive economic development strategy, and sharing his expertise in the education system and his role in economic development. So we've missed Wayne's voice at the table. He's back in Durham and here today, and we're really hoping we'll see him again in the future. So with that, Wayne, I'd like to invite you to come on up so we can properly say thank you. And we're going to be really embarrassing and make folks pause for a moment to take a photo.
I like that.
Order the chicken for next year.
Thank
Thank you, Wayne. So our next recognition is a little bit sadder. This one's a little harder for me. So Victoria. Victoria most recently was our chair. And Victoria passed away in April. Sorry, I'm not good at this. She's been my mentor personally, and I know for many of the commissioners, she's been a mentor as well. Another longtime commission member, longtime local volunteer, and a longtime member of the planning community of New Hampshire, both in her professional and volunteer life. She took on the role of chair in 2016, and shortly after becoming chair, the longtime director announced her retirement. Cynthia had been director here for almost 20 years. And so Victoria led that process in recruitment of a new leader for the planning commission, and she got us through that. I came on board and she was, always there as a good, quiet, guiding voice through that process. She helped lead us through a strategic planning process in 2018, 2019, where we took a comprehensive look at our future. And then she was there when the pandemic caught us all. And we were all doing a little bit of scrambling at first in March 2020, trying to figure out how do we operate, how do we protect our employees, how do we maintain the business of the organization. It just really was there for everyone at the Planning Commission. I think broke all our hearts when she did pass away in April. We did reach out to her family, who aren't able to be here today, but just wanted to say our thank you to Victoria. In a more lighthearted thank you, but equally as sincere. A little over a year ago, Victoria shared with us that she had been sick and that she needed to step down. And Dave, you were willing to, with a little bit of arm twisting and a couple of phone calls from a few different people, you were willing to step up and kind of step in and help serve in that leadership role when we needed someone to do so. Steve is not new to volunteerism. He's been a city council member, he's been a planning board member, but was only just recently a member of the planning commission. Steve joined as a commissioner, I think only 6 months after I did. So we kind of went through our orientation together a little, but quickly decided to jump in and sit in on the executive committee meetings, and less than a year on the planning commission, he was on the executive committee, and then we dragged him in as chair. But I will say that it's Dave's dedication, thoughtfulness, and many questions really make us better as an organization, and give us pause to think about why we're here, what we're doing, and how we can do that the best that we can. So for that, I want to say thank you to Dave, as do I think all of the staff, and also recognize you and say please come on up so we can say thank you as well.
Takes a lot of people doing an awful lot of work, both as employees and volunteers, to make this organization work. And Jen mentioned my experience in Dover and a lot of other committees as well. And it's not just New England, but anywhere things can get really parochial, where people, there are all these looking inward, and they don't look beyond their borders. It's getting better, but that's one of the things that I absolutely love about finding out coming to SRPC. I get to meet and talk to people all the time from various communities, and they have to respond to me because we're coming to the same meeting. It's great. I learn all kinds of really great stuff. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, with that, that is all we have. And thank you again to our panelists and our speakers for a really exciting conversation. This was fantastic to be back in person and have this type of an event. I will agree with Dave's comments earlier. When we first got started, I like just coming in and having a good sit down, have a chance to just relax, enjoy each other's company, chat, and learn and continue to grow as planners in our communities. So with that, I will thank everyone for joining us here today. And then I will note, yes, I'm getting reminded, staff, commissioners, please don't run away. We'd love to get a photo because we haven't really taken any photos in the last 2 years. And so we'd love to have updated photos of everyone. And if anyone wants to volunteer to be a photographer, we'd love to have someone stay and take pictures too for us. So thank you again, and we look forward to seeing you in the future.